Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be on Russell Westbrook. So I specifically want to talk about Russell Westbrook's legacy. I feel like that's been a topic that's been brought up now that he has again lost in the first round of the playoffs. People have been sort of teeing off on Westbrook, slamming him, bashing him a lot, uh, making certain comparisons that aren't necessarily respectful, saying he's kind of like a bum or a scrub. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sort of compare and contrast what one hot take was compared to what mine is, and you guys can decide for yourselves what you think of him. So Chris Broussard, who is a reporter who used to work at ESPN, now works at Fox Sports, is a great reporter, probably the best out there for NBA reporting. And he came on the show First Take on Fox the other day, and he talked about how he thought that basically Russell Westbrook's legacy is the next Allen Iverson legacy, and he talked about how they're players who are respected for their statistical achievements, and they're considered really good players, but they're just guys who are never willing to take a back seat, and because of that, they never won a championship, and that's how they'll be remembered. And so today I would like to give my own take on this and sort of point out how I think Chris Broussard might be slightly wrong on this, and also there are some points that I think he makes that are very valid points. So I think first things first, um, when you look at Russell Westbrook's statistical achievements over his career, especially recently, you see the 3 consecutive seasons of triple doubles, uh, averaged 28 points per game or more in I think 3 seasons. 2014 to 15, he averaged 28. 2016 to 17, he averaged 31. 2017 to 18, he averaged about 29. And this year, he averaged about 22 or 23. Led the league in assists a couple times. So obviously very impressive statistically. A perennial All-Star who will probably rack up about 12 or 13 All-Star appearances by the end of his career. And I think the thing that Chris Broussard got sort of wrong that I'm going to point out about Westbrook is basically the type of player that he is. So he said players like um, Carmelo, Westbrook, and then I think you would probably include like Carmelo Anthony in there. They're guys who are never willing to take a back seat and never accept that they would play any other way or that they weren't the best player on their team and that they would let somebody else take charge, sort of. And I think that that is wrong regarding Westbrook. I think that Broussard is putting him into the category of Iverson incorrectly, and so here is how I want to define it. I think that there are certain players in NBA history, like Allen Iverson or Carmelo, who are definitely unwilling to take a back seat, and really with them as the best player on a team, you're never going to win a championship. But I think at the same time, there was a different type of player where they did win championships, and it was because they were the second best player on their team. So probably like the poster child for this would be somebody like Scottie Pippen, a guy who a phenomenal player, great talent, could have definitely been good enough to lead his own team, but definitely did not have the talent to win a championship with him as the sole alpha dog. And I think that's more the type of player that Westbrook is. He's a number 2 option on a team without a number 1 option. Now, of course, this year and last year they have had Paul George, so they have had a number 1 option. But just overall, I think from 16 to 17, they didn't really have one. And I think although Paul George is a really good player and can put up a lot of points, as we saw this season, I think truly at heart, he can't be the best player on a championship team either. So that being said, I think that there's definite proof that Russell Westbrook is more of a number 2, and that would be his willingness to take a backseat to Durant for most of the time that they were together. I mean, some people would argue that the reason that Durant left is because Westbrook was too forceful and dominating of the ball. I think he was, but they also went to the finals when he was still doing that type of play. And I think that they were still a successful team, still got to the conference finals in 2011, won 50 games in 2010. Let's see here. 2013 they were a 61 win team. 2014 they had 58 wins and got to the Western Conference Finals. 2015, Durant was out for the whole year, and so they didn't really do that well. They had 45 wins. Then 2016, they won 55 games and got to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. So they're always a team that was like basically always at least the second or third best team in the league. And I think it's ridiculous that people are saying like, man, like you just can never win with Russ. I think that's a bad take because they are winning a ton. They're getting to at least the finals or the Western Conference Finals almost every year that those two were together. Actually, every year that they were together and healthy, besides 2009 to 10, they at least got to the Western Conference Finals, which is super impressive. So I think it was a thing where if they would have just stayed together 2 more years, probably that they would have won a title together. But that's ancient history. But I think that we saw enough of Westbrook giving Durant shine and assisting to him pretty frequently that he he knows deep down in his heart he's a number two, even though he wants to be a number one. We also saw that this year with him and Paul George. Last year with Paul George, Russ wasn't really willing to take a back seat, but this year he definitely was. He was more committed to assisting and facilitating, and PG averaged a career high in points, which was 28 for second best in the league, by the way, as a result of that. And it's by far his career high. I think before that his career high was like 23, so PG took a big step up as far as scoring this year. So I think that that's concrete proof that Westbrook is a second option at heart, and he knows it too, and he's willing to be it. So that being said, I have collected a list of guys who were the second option on a championship level team, and then the star player left the team, and I'm going to basically talk about how those players did and compare them to Westbrook's. So the first guy I have on this list is the one and only Scottie Pippen. So if we look at the, let's just say 2 seasons that Michael Jordan left, because really it was pretty close to 2 seasons. In the first year, they were a 55-win team, and he got the Bulls to the second round of the Eastern Conference bracket. So that's pretty good, you know. Second round is respectable, but again, it's a significant step down from winning a three-peat. And then the next year, the Bulls won 47 games, with Michael Jordan only playing around 20 games that season. And the Bulls again got to the second round and lost. So again, a Scottie Pippen led team was good, was a playoff contender, was in the mix, but they only got to the second round. Now moving on, the next player I have on here is James Worthy. James Worthy was drafted by the Lakers in '82 and played with them until 1994. If you don't know, Magic Johnson retired in 1991, meaning that James Worthy played 3 seasons on the Lakers without Magic Johnson to helm the team. And he is a Hall of Famer. He's a top 50 player of all time. And I would just like to remind everybody that in those 3 seasons without Magic, the Lakers, with James Worthy as their primary option, they missed the playoffs once. They made the playoffs twice and lost in the first round each year. And in the 2 seasons that they did make the playoffs, their collective record over those 2 years was 82 and 82. So they weren't lighting the world on fire by any means. So that's how a James Worthy led team did. Next, I'm going to be looking at Kevin McHale, who only played 1 season after Larry Bird left as not really the primary option, but still a pretty key contributor to the Celtics. And what happened? They lost in the first round. Next, Joe Dumars played for the Pistons for 5 seasons after Isaiah Thomas retired in 1994. So Joe Dumars was the guy who immediately stepped up and was the main guy on the team. And I'll remind you that the Pistons were one of the worst teams in the league in 94 to 95. And they were getting bounced out of the first round pretty regularly, with Joe Dumars and Grant Hill as their primary players afterwards. So Joe Dumars, without IAT, Isaiah Thomas, he lost in the first round 3 times as the primary guy on his team. Going forward, then we have Tracy McGrady, who I think is a pretty interesting comparison to give to Russell Westbrook, because he had a very similar career arc, I think, in a few ways. So the first is that obviously he lost perennially in the first round when he was with Orlando, but then he got to Houston, got an all-star caliber player in Yao Ming, much like Russell Westbrook has now acquired Paul George. And what did they do? They lost in the first round in '05. They didn't make the playoffs in '06. They lost in the first round in '07. They lost in the first round in '08. And they got to the second round in '09, but T-Mac was out for all of the playoffs, so that doesn't really count. So in the 3 years where they were healthy, they '05, '07, and '08 lost in the first round. That's with two All-Stars in their prime. And I think from that perspective, that is very similar to Russell Westbrook's situation. And I think it just goes to show that just because you've got two great players in your prime doesn't mean you're necessarily going to go far in the playoffs. Um, and that's my take on that. So now the last person I want to touch on here is I think the person whose career is most similar to Russell Westbrook's up until this point. They obviously diverge a bit later on, but that's Penny Hardaway, a guy who was very good, made the All-NBA first team, uh, made several All-Star appearances during the first part of his career with Orlando, played with the Magic from '93 to '99, and really just went through the same thing in that Shaq left him like Durant left Westbrook, and basically Penny was left there to be the man on a team that really wasn't necessarily built for him, but he made the best of it. And what happened? They made the playoffs one year, missed it the next, made the playoffs the next year. Not exactly the same as Westbrook losing the first round 3 straight years, but very similar. And so I think if Penny Hardaway would have stayed healthy, him and Westbrook would have had very similar trajectories. And I think to be fair to Penny Hardaway, we don't see him as a guy who failed necessarily. Maybe we do because he didn't ever get far without Shaq. Maybe we do because he got injured. That's not really fair. That's not where I'm going with this. But Penny Hardaway is just seen as a guy who is a really good player who was always just meant to be a number two on a championship team. We don't see him as a guy who failed to lead or anything like that or collapsed. We see him as a guy who was never meant for the number one role, and he accepted that, and that's where his career went. So people might argue, well, Russell Westbrook doesn't think he's a number two option, but I think the proof is in the pudding. This whole regular season, he was with Paul George. In the playoffs, he was with Paul George. When Kevin Durant was there, up until maybe the last playoff series with the Warriors in the final couple of games, Russell was willing to take the seat next to Kevin Durant and be the second option. So I don't think that's fair to say he's not willing to be, because I think the proof is there. And then again, you look at these other guys. Joe Dumars was on a championship level team. When it's turned over to him, the team just loses in the first round. Same with James Worthy. Same with any of these guys. I just think it's unfair to keep saying Westbrook can't win on his own. Westbrook can't win on his own. Well, I think it's pretty clear when you take away a dominant force like Durant, your team is going to struggle. And no matter who you replace them with, Paul George or anybody, they're not as good as Durant, who's basically in contention for being the best player in the league right now. And so the point of all this is I don't see Westbrook as a disappointment or falling short of expectations necessarily. I see him as a number two option who people are shoehorning into being a number one player on a championship team. And for that reason, he's coming up short of people's expectations that are just incorrect. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave your comments below. Hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.